The Los Angeles riots of 1992, also known as the Rodney King riots, were sparked on April 29, 1992, when a jury acquitted 4 Los Angeles Police Department officers accused in the videotaped beating of African-American motorist Rodney King following a high-speed pursuit. Thousands of people in the Los Angeles area rioted over the 6 days following the verdict. Widespread looting, assault, arson, and murder occurred, and property damage topped roughly $1 billion. Many of the crimes were racially motivated or perpetrated. In all, 53 people died during the riots and thousands more were injured. This is the story of my father in the Los Angeles riots.
My name is Steve Pelham, Nick's dad. I'm a retired Air Force Chief Master Sergeant who, during a 30-year career, spent 4 years stationed in Los Angeles. My first duty date in Los Angeles was April 29, 1992, at the onset of the LA riots. I drove into downtown Los Angeles where I was going to be working. As I drove in, the buildings were burning everywhere. I likened it to what Nero might have seen when Rome was burning. There were fires everywhere. I tried to call my boss to find out what I should do, and I couldn't reach anyone, so I chose to enter Los Angeles on my own, and because I was in uniform, was able to go through the guards that were not allowing people into the city. I entered onto the street that my office was on in South Central LA, right in the heart of the African American community, and right in the heart of where all the riots were starting. Everything was on fire. The streets, the trees, every single building, everything. And all around me were people running around, breaking into houses, breaking into closed restaurants, causing all kinds of mayhem. I proceeded to reach my building. It was on fire. They had tried to loot it and were unsuccessful, but they did manage to set it on fire. There was no one around to put out the fire because everything was burning. Over 1,000 buildings burned down the first day. The fire was raging all around the building, and a group of us tried to put out the building using fire extinguishers and garden hoses before the water pressure went out. We ended up saving approximately a third of the building, so 2/3 of it was destroyed. I decided to continue my efforts to try and help to save the building and the contents of the building. And as I was walking down a hallway, there was a large explosion. I grabbed a fire extinguisher and went to put out the fire that had started. The fire extinguisher that I picked up was incredibly hot. I had to drop it. It turned out that the fire extinguishers were exploding. So every time we put out a fire, another one would start because the heat in the building was causing the fire extinguishers to explode. So myself and 3 other guys started going through the building trying to remove all the fire extinguishers that we could find to prevent further explosions from occurring. We removed approximately 30 fire extinguishers, and once they cooled down, we used those to try and put out the remaining fire. During this time, the fire was so intense that my shoes that I wore for work had actually melted around my feet. Once we secured all the fire extinguishers, I proceeded to call my boss, and I finally got a hold of him, and I told him what was going on, and he asked me what was happening with the records on all the individual people that were going into the military from that particular entrance station. Had they burned up, or were they still there? If this material were to burn, everything would have to be reaccomplished. Basically, if those records had been destroyed, it would have cost the government well over $10 million to replace. My boss told me where the records were stored. I worked my way to that area, and because it was in a secure area, the fire had not reached it. It had reached the door that was the entrance into this building. In fact, I was able to get to the door, and when I went to kick it, the door was almost all ash, and it just basically vaporized right in front of me. I went inside, the records were in there, but they were smoldering. I was afraid that they would catch fire at any moment, so I proceeded to take some shopping carts that were in the hallway that they used to transport records from point A to point B, and I started filling them up with the records. I then took them out and put them in the trunk of my car, and then in the back seat of my car, and then in the front seat of my car, and pretty soon I had almost 25,000 records sitting in my car. After I collected all this information, I drove down to my boss's house, and when I got to his house, we offloaded them into his house once they had quit smoldering. Then I proceeded to wait out the remainder of the riots, where there was many days of looting, many days of rioting, and when it was all over, there was a third of my building left. The rest of it had burned down, and for the next 3 years, I worked in a burned down building that had been torched in the LA riots.
Because of his efforts to safeguard the property of the U.S. government, my father, Stephen Pelham, had multiple newspaper articles written about him. He appeared in Airman's Magazine and was awarded the Air Force Achievement Medal for Valor.